Hold it. Hold it. I think I feel something happening. Yes, I think. Wait. Oh no. Keep it together, girls. Keep it together. Ah! Rarity's yelp of panic was the final sound before the pyramid of 5 mares collapsed into a heap on the floor of the ballroom. Guards, who had been watching hopefully, rushed forward to help the mares back to their hooves. Rainbow Dash, however, had no patience for assistance. With the sheer force of her own frustration, she pulled herself free of the pony pile before looking back at her friends. That's the 5th time we've tried this stupid pyramid, Rarity. It doesn't work. Well, I don't see you coming up with any bright ideas. Rarity snapped back. She offered a quick smile and a quiet thank you to the guard who had just aided her. The moment the polite pleasantry was complete, however, her brow furrowed and she glared back at Rainbow Dash. And before you say a word, doing a sonic rainboom in the middle of the castle ballroom is still not a good idea. I wasn't going to say that, Rainbow Dash argued, glaring at Rarity with her forehoofs crossed, hovering just above the ground. But since you mentioned, yeah, I still think one of my rainbooms would work. Rarity slapped her hoof against her face. Oh, of all the thick-headed things. Hey, are you saying I have a thick head? Oh, no, darling, I'd never say that. Rarity replied with her smile and pleasantly sweet voice. A growl then entered into her voice, pent-up frustration flowing through her heart, released in opening of an oven. I'm just saying that there's a reason that, when you crash, everything seems to break except your skull. Dragging her hoof across her face, Applejack turned away from her friends as the argument broke out. Rarity and Rainbow Dash went at it. Fluttershy kept trying to calm down the disagreement while Pinkie Pie flip-flopped over with who she agreed with. It was the same thing that had happened just 10 minutes earlier. The first time their frustration had reached a boiling point. Any y'all having better luck than we are? Applejack asked as she approached what had been the refreshment table at the party's castle. The guards had been picking at it since the search had begun, using the snacks to try and keep their energy up. Most of it was gone at this point, but there was more than enough punch left. Applejack poured herself a cup before turning to look at Shining Armor. He was holding his own cold, ice-filled cup against his forehead. No, all we've managed to do is find more rune spells, he answered. He took a drink from his before pressing the cup back against his head. The detector spell Spike sent has really helped. The runes are littered across the castle. Somebody's been playing at this for a long time, but we still haven't got any way to find where anyone else went. What about you? You got anything out of the elements? Not even a twinkle. Twilight always made it look so easy, and I don't know if we'll be able to do this without her and the element of magic. We tried standing in every shape Rarity could think of. We've tried shouting. We've tried singing. I just don't know what else we can try. It's okay. We knew from the start that getting the elements of harmony would work with a piece missing was going to be a long shot. Shining Armor swigged down the remainder of his punch before tossing the paper cup to the nearby garbage can, which had been pulled in from the kitchen. We finished checking the west side of the guest rooms for spell runes. There's lots of open beds if any of you want some sleep. Thanks. But I don't think we'll be able to do a little bit longer. After all, Rainbow and Rarity still have enough energy to argue. The small verbal jab of the situation made Shining crack a smile for a brief moment, before his lips fell back to a worried frown. He turned away, returning to the bandstand which had become the nerve center of the search efforts. Applejack lingered by the refreshment table, refilling her cup and taking another deep swig. A bit of punch dribbled from her lips, down to the element of honesty. Cursing under her breath, Applejack set her cup down and grabbed a napkin, trying to wipe off the punch before it got sticky. As she tried to clean the necklace, Applejack looked at the element. The irritated orange, stubborn, refusing to work, apple-shaped jewel. That was one thing that had confused her right from the start. Yes, she was orange, but the apples on her cutie mark were red. Why wasn't her element a red apple or even a green apple? The gem looked more like a tangerine than an honest apple. Some of Applejack's frustration vented as she let her mind wander and wonder why her jewel was orange. But the jewel also brought back memories. So much had changed since they had first used the unassuming jewels. As crazy as Pinkie Pie was, Twilight was the one that seemed like a magnet for trouble. Ponyville was never quite the same after that brainy unicorn moved into the library. Yet, even with all the trouble Twilight had brought in her wake, Applejack wouldn't have wanted a thing to be different. They had gotten through thick and thin as friends and had become better friends because of it. And that was what mattered. Twilight was their friend, and they'd gotten their friend even when they had to search even mile of Equestria. It didn't matter if they never got the element of harmony to light up again. It was then that a glint caught Applejack's eye, a small sparkle that preluded a weak but warm glow. Her jewel of her necklace was lighting up a little. The metal parts grew warm against her fur. Her element was awakening, and as it did, Applejack smiled while wiping the napkin one final time across the gem's surface. The greatest power anybody's known. Yet you're as simple as biting into an apple. It ain't about trying to get you to work. It's about finding Twilight. Applejack said to herself as the glow from the gem grew brighter, as if responding positively to her words. She tossed the used napkin into the trash and then walked back to her friends. Rarity and Rainbow Dash were now giving one another the silent treatment. Fluttershy was trying to convince Rainbow to apologize, while Pinkie was acting out an apologetic puppet show, trying to inspire Rarity to do the same. Applejack whistled, drawing the attention of the four mares and several of the guards in the rooms. "Girls, I think I've got it figured out." While I laid on the bed of the disheveled guest room, resting on her side as she stared at the distance, she looked at the bare wall of the room where twin blades continued to scratch at the stone in her sword. The same wall where the words that included the phrase "Luna lies" stared back at Twilight, as if silently mocking her. Her mind was fractured on whether or not to believe the words. On one hoof, it fit with some of the discrepancies that she had faced in her original understanding of the situation. On another, she couldn't think of any creature that would do this except for Discord. Who else could warp reality to such an extent? Who else could make monsters out of ponies she cared about? On still another hoof, there was a chance the words were another part of the game. Discord could be trying to dissuade her from snuffing out the final light, to question herself. But on her fourth and final hoof, she could have misunderstood everything from the beginning. After all, when she and her friends first met Discord, she had been so sure the element of harmony had been hidden in the Canterlot Castle maze. But she had been wrong then. Could she be wrong now? There was no way to know what was fact and what was lie. Physical evidence had to be questioned when you're dealing with Discord. If she was dealing with Discord at all. If she wasn't dealing with what the believed to be reformed spirit of chaos was, then there were so many other questions that had to be asked. If it was someone else, how did they do it? More importantly, why did they do it? She wished she could talk to some pony, to get another opinion on the thoughts rattling on her head. She wanted to talk to Princess Celestia, Luna, Cadence, her friends, to hear them say it was going to be okay. She also wanted to talk to Twin Blades. If the words scratched into the wall truly belonged to the Solar Guard, then Twin Blades knew something. In her mind could be a single fact that could help Twilight clear her own thoughts. If only she knew a spell. Sure, Twilight knew several charms that were close to the effect she wanted. Her memory spell could make a pony remember who they were. Not what she needed. She needed to know what Twin Blades knew. Or at the very least, she needed to be able to view Twin Blades' memories. She knew no spell for that. Trying to guess at it would put Twin Blades at risk. Twilight needed to do research. For that, she needed a library. The castle had one. Luna had mentioned it, and Twin Blades had scratched the word library into the wall in several places. But Twilight also remembered Luna's rules. The library and the halls surrounding it were Princess Celestia's territory. To go there would be putting herself at risk. She would also be ignoring the single remaining light. Luna's words were true. If what Twin Blades had scratched into the wall was another part of Discord's game, this could be what Discord wanted. Perhaps he had planned for her to get caught by Cadence or Philomena. Perhaps now he was trying to prevent her from finishing the game as it was intended. But to snuff the final light, when there was a possibility it was the wrong thing to do. Twilight cursed, getting up from the bed. Though she was still mentally exhausted, her body had rested. The aches had eased and wounds had scabbed over completely. She couldn't fly, her wing was still just too injured. But she wouldn't let that stop her. She didn't know what was the right decision, and when that happened, she needed to trust her instincts. And right now, her instincts were telling her to go to the library, find a spell, and get more information about what was going on. She needed to know more, or risk making an irreparable mistake. Inching her head to the side, Twilight peeked around the corner. She cast out her magic, her tiny orb of light floating slowly through the air. She scanned the corridor ahead with her with the illumination spell. There was no sign of Princess Celestia, no sign of the Headless Horse, and no sign of some yet uncountered horror in the dark. That was good, though Twilight did not let her guard drop. She had scouted the hallway, now she had to scout the connected rooms. She licked her lips as the magic from her horn grew stronger. A rectangular shape, a magically conjured mirror, joined the sphere of light. Twilight had erected the two spells, using them in tandem to check the rooms adjacent to this particular hallway. She opened each door, using the light and mirror spells to check the rooms, working with the same finesse as a dentist with their tools. She had been Twilight's procedure since departing from the room where Twin Blades remained, still scratching words into the wall. It had been a time-consuming procedure, but Twilight knew that her next encounter with one of the castle horrors might be her last. Her escape from Princess Celestia and the Headless Horse had been luck. If her blind teleport had gone even a little bit differently, she could have been injured, or been unable to defend herself. Her extra caution also came with one simple fact. She knew she was heading into dangerous territory. If there was any truth to what was behind Luna's rules, Princess Celestia's hunting grounds surrounded the library. That meant if the princess got away from the Headless Horse, she'd likely return to her territory. So Twilight knew she had to be cautious, but also move with some efficiency. The longer she dawdled, the greater the chance she'd run into Celestia, or the princess might pick up on her scent. She had to keep moving, and for the past several hallways she had done just that. She was being as systematic as possible in her search, mentally mapping her path. She had to be sure she wasn't just going back over places she had already searched. She also had to be sure to find her way back to Twin Blades. The search for the library and the appropriate memory spell would be pointless if she was unable to get back to that particular room. For all that work, Twilight had maintained a detailed map in her mind. She could leave no marks in the path or track her progress with lit candles and torches. No, the castle's nature prevented that. When she got too far away, the lights would be snuffed and any mark would be erased. It was so nerve-wracking, like the castle itself was erasing every trace of her existence. Twilight couldn't focus on that mystery, though. She had to plan ahead of her. Find the library, find the spell, and see Twin Blade's memories. Then use that new information to decide if snuffing the final light was truly the right thing to do. And it seemed she had finally accomplished the first step of her plan. At the far end of the corridor she had been using her light and mirror spell to explore stood a pair of large doors. Her magic had opened the doors, and with the combination of her two charms, Twilight was able to see inside the distant room. She saw shelves filled with books. Without a doubt, Twilight knew a library when she saw it. It was an urge in Twilight to rush into the library, but she held herself back. She had to stick to her procedure. It had kept her safe so far, and she wasn't about to abandon it. She rounded the corner, entering the hallway. She pulled shut all the doors she had opened, then returned to the end of the corridor from which she had entered. There she laid down a spell, a tripwire that would make a very unique, unignorable sound if it was triggered. It was her early warning. Yes, she could not know for sure the spell would remain when she went far into the library, but so far the castle's nature of undoing her changes didn't occur until she got too far away. A single hallway's length seemed to be a short enough distance where her spells would remain. She had to hope that would remain true once she was in the library. Otherwise, she would have no warning should some dark horror start following her trail. The setting of the tripwire spell was the last step, though. With a small sense of safety, Twilight now turned and trotted into the library doors. She stepped through, eyes quickly scanning for some new nightmare. When she saw none, Twilight promptly turned shut and locked the doors behind her. She was in the heart of Celestia's territory now. For all she knew, she had entered the den of her snake-mouthed mentor. There was no telling when Celestia would return, but a locked door would at least slow her down. Tripwire in place and doors locked, Twilight felt that it was safe enough to really take in her surroundings. The library was an impressive sight. Not as grand as the Crystal Empire's or Canterlot's library, but the sight of the bookshelves stretching from the floor to the ceiling was like a warm blanket for Twilight. She was in her element in this place. The library itself, from the perspective of its main entrance, was lopsided. To Twilight's right was the majority of the shelves, stretching out into clean rows and columns that, like soldiers of literature. On the left was a reading area. The room was capped with a half-circle wall, stripped with tall, thin windows. Comfortable chairs and tables intended for reading stood around a cold fireplace at the crest of the wall's half-circle. Twilight approached the fireplace. Lighting a nice, warm fire appealed to her, and a stack of firewood next to the hearth made the opportunity too inviting to resist. She checked the flume, stacked the logs, and ignited the bit of kindling with a spark of magic. A few moments of magical nurturing later, and the fireplace crackled and popped with flames. Immediately, the warmth washed over Twilight, and she soaked it in as she let her eyes wander. "Doesn't look like there's a card catalog," she muttered, though she was the only one to hear the observation. "Must be a private collection. That's okay. There's not that many. I'm sure they're organized by subject. I just have to find the books on magic." Despite Twilight reassuring herself, other thoughts swirled in the back of her mind, whispers and claws at her optimism. The books could easily have no rhyme or reason to their placement. If that was so, she doubted she'd have enough time to check this relatively small library before something or someone came pounding at the door. Shifting to warm the other side of her body, Twilight turned her head away from the rows of shelves and looked at the fireplace. There was a mantel above the hearth, on which sat a line that Twilight could only describe as a glass case. Empty wooden strands of various shapes and sizes stood contained within rectangles of glass. There were no labels to indicate what might they have been, though one of the 6 display cases was occupied. It held a single scroll, carefully rolled and supported by a pair of Y-shaped wooden poles. Twilight's vision, however, soon focused on the wall behind the mantel. The ambient light from the fireplace revealed a painting hanging above the wall. The portrait was huge, as wide as the chimney was across and twice as tall as Twilight. The frame looked like it was on the verge of collapse. Its wood was brittle, partially burnt, and pulling apart at the seams. The painting, however, was pristine. The delicate brush strokes depicted a summertime scene atop a hill, a tall pony with wings spread wide grandly, while in the background a castle stood amongst a dense forest. White coat, pastel mane, and a gentle, motherly smile that Twilight knew all too well. "Celestia," Twilight whispered, the words escaping her mouth like thieves in the night. She couldn't help but stare at the painting, baffled by its mere presence. The portrait was too flattering to be part of Discord's game. Maybe it was an antique, something the castle's true owner had bought at an auction. It didn't seem that old, but she had seen some impressively restored artifacts from Canterlot. Through the running confusion in her mind, a smile crept to Twilight's lips. It was really a good portrait. It was helping her remember the real Celestia while burying recent memories. That was the real one. The way she was supposed to be. Whatever this game, whether it was caused by Discord or not, Twilight knew she had to figure it out. For Cadence, Philomena, and for Princess Celestia. "Don't worry, Princess. I promise, I'll figure this out. I just need that." There was a bunch of snaps and thuds, like the rumble of thunder, making Twilight jump. She spun on her hooves. Her eyes moved to the door. She expected it to be broken down or buckled from the weight of something smashing against the far side. The doors, however, stood tall. Her eyes then scanned the room. She looked for some figure, some beast looming in the dark she had previously missed. All the while, she was mentally scolding herself. She had let her guard down for a painting. Who knows what could have crept up behind her while she'd been staring at the wall? Yet there was no evil librarian or creature made of book pages. She was still the only living soul in the library. What she did see, however, was a pile of fallen books next to a splintered shelf. Like the flame of the painting, the wood on the shelves showed their age. One shelf had given up the ghost, snapping under the weight of the books it supported. The timing was unsettling, and Twilight's eyes continued to scan the room for something that could be blamed on the collapse. She began taking tentative steps, eyes and ears shifting back and forth, almost like she was crossing several dozen streets in quick succession. Twilight formed a rhythm. She took a step, looked left and right, and repeated as she moved towards the collapsed shelf. Every 10 steps, she stopped and looked back at the library's door, checking to make sure it was still closed. It felt like the books were bait, luring her into some trap, yet everything continued to remain as it was. Twilight reached the fallen books unharmed. She could see the broken shelf and lingering bent nails. She tried to see some sign of foul play. She used a charm to try and detect some kind of magic and looked for some evidence of tampering. Yet there was nothing. The shelf looked like it had simply failed from age and a lack of maintenance. And once more, it was a strange doctorum. The books were pristine, as if they had been freshly painted, unlike the aged shelves. Time seemed to have only ravaged the furniture that held such precious knowledge, leaving the wisdom within the pages unharmed. Without even thinking about it, Twilight began to pick up the stacks of books. She couldn't just leave them on the floor, after all. She began forming stacks, placing titles that looked like fictions into one pile while organizing the others by subject matter. There was a book on cooking and another on modern weather control concepts. It was as Twilight feared. The library seemed to have no organization. Books of such different topics were just thrown on the shelf next to another. The book entitled Fine Teas and Coffees of the World was sitting next to the Whispering Songs, a piece of classical literature. Next to both was a spell book, Spells and Enchantments on the Mind. Twilight paused on that tome, cracking it open. She checked the table of contents, then quickly turned to a specific page. There, written in fine lettering across the top of the page in question, were the words, Advanced Memory Viewing. It was the spell she needed, laid out before her in clear and concise instructions. The pony, whose memories being viewed had to be willing, and it was not a perfect recollection. You get bits and pieces, mostly blurred visuals and muffled sounds except for the things that the mind had been focusing upon. It was relying on the subject's recollection, not like some other memory spells she had seen where they were, in truth, mixed with temporal spells to get a more accurate result. It was not perfect, but it was what she needed. Twilight couldn't help but smile as she shut the book. She finished quickly stacking the other books into a small pile, foregoing her usual orderly tendencies in favor of taste. She then turned and trotted back to the door, carrying the book in her magic. Twilight left the library, pausing only momentarily to ensure that the hallway beyond was safe before slipping outside. It was a rapid departure, one that had been watched by a pair of keen, unblinking eyes. Retracing her steps flawlessly, it did not take long for Twilight to return to the room where Twinblade sat, still scratching at the wall with her sword. The Solar Guard had etched a few more words into the stone and was now working on the third letter of a new one. It was the one difference Twinblades had compared to the other mindless sleepwalkers in the castle. Others performed acts ad nauseum without yielding any result. Twinblades was, somehow, being productive. She was trying to get a message out. And now Twilight had a way of receiving what that message was. She prepared the spell quickly. First, she shoved the bedroom's dresser across the door. To perform the spell, it would involve entering a hypnotic state. She didn't want anything, including the room, get into it, stop her from defending herself. Second, she had to position herself. She had to sit back to back with Twinblades, a thankful easy step since Twinblades was facing the wall etchings. Twilight borrowed a pillow off the bed to get comfortable, using the book guidelines to position herself at an ideal distance from Twinblades. The third step involved preparatory spells. A tether between her mind and her own body so she would not get lost in the memories and be able to return. Then a tether between herself and Twin Blades, which would act as a conduit between their two minds. After that, only one thing remained. Twilight had to project her consciousness out of her body. It was to a degree like the astral projection spell she had learned from Luna. Her mind had to leave her body and travel to Twin Blade's thoughts. Then, if her presence was welcome, she would be able to look into Twin Blade's memories. If she was rejected, her mind would be driven back to her own body. It was all relatively safe, according to the book. Of course, that was all assuming she got the spell right the first time. Still, Twilight had to at least try. She took a cleansing breath and shut her eyes. She called on her magic, formed a spell while reciting the book's mantra in her head. It was part self-hypnosis, part magic, and part just going to sleep. The body rested while the mind wandered. Her mind was a cloud, drifting away from her earthly body but still connected, as if tied together by a string. Her mind could wander wherever it wanted, but would never get lost. She was a leaf on the breeze, being blown from a tree to a nearby pond, from the home she knew to a new place with its own feelings and nature. Her mind was calm, her body was sleepy, her consciousness was slipping away, pouring out of her head like a graceful waterfall. She was stepping into another plane of existence. She was entering a place that few ponies had seen with their mind's eye. The astral plane, where flesh and material things were transparent. There was no moon, no sun, just the calm darkness and the twinkling lights and minds that souls together formed a place with the same beauty as a pristine night sky. The spell began to take effect, a tingling sensation creeping across Twilight's body. It was a kind of paralysis that occurred naturally when a pony was sleeping. The muscles in her body were turning off. They were relaxing, regenerating, and that was okay. This was what Twilight wanted. Her body was peaceful, calm. Her mind was ready to wander. The door was open. She had just moved through it. There was no stepping. Her consciousness had no hooves. She was a balloon on a string, floating wherever she wanted to. She could go anywhere. She chose to float out of the door of her mind. In a blurry shift of colors, like watercolors flowing across a paper canvas, the astral plane came into focus. A field of stars, each one representing the mind and soul of a pony. It was a familiar sensation, like being submerged underwater on a pristine summer night. Twinkling stars, a sea of lights that were beautiful both in appearance and in the lives they represented. But there were differences to the astral projection spell. Sensations that were not like the other times she had cast it. For one thing, she felt the magical tethers on her consciousness. It inspired thoughts of her library, the smell of books, Spike's smiling face, the warmth of a place she called home. The other tether was pulling Twilight gently. She could not feel anything from this tether, but knew it was her link to Twin Blade's mind. She let her consciousness be pulled to that tether, seeing she was being drawn closer to one star in particular. It was a dim star, weak, but it was constant and unwavering. It did not twinkle as the other stars did. She would be in Twin Blade's memories soon. Until then, she let the focus of her consciousness wander. She could see the clusters of lights that represented distant towns and cities. There was a lot of stars above her. It was like a city in the sky. Were they near Cloudsdale? Or was Cloudsdale near them? Hard to say, for sure where the Pegasi city could move easily like a boat on water. There were also several stars nearby. A few hundred points of light surrounded Twilight's consciousness. It was hard to judge the distance, but she picked up on the feeling of fear as she focused in on the nearby lights. Were those the stars of the ponies trapped in the castle? They seemed too close. Twilight could think of no other explanation. Perhaps they appeared closer because of the differences between the memory spell and the standard astral projection charm. The proximity of the other stars, however, wasn't the only thing out of place. The other stars were tethered. Like the charms Twilight had cast on herself, every other nearby star had a tether connected to it. Some were thin, like spider threads. Others were thicker, like kite string or yarn. Yet no matter the difference in diameter, all threads had the same commonality. They were the same color, steely gray, and they were all connected to the same point. One star in particular was a linchpin. That one light twinkled a great deal, like it was a candle struggling to stay lit in the face of an unforgiving wind. Even as Twilight's consciousness was drawn closer and closer to Twinblade's mind, she could not take her attention away from that one light. There were a few broken tethers hanging limp from the central light, 4 in total if Twilight had counted correctly. There was also one tether that was a different color. Instead of gray, one of the lines was purple. Twilight's eyes began to trace the path of the off-color tether, watching it weave amongst the others before reaching a single star. Twilight's consciousness began to enter Twinblade's mind. The astral plane began to fade, but before the spell could complete, Twilight was able to see where the off-color tether went. The purple line connected to her own star, the central one, and from her own home star, she saw the dangling remains of a steely gray tether that had been broken.